When you have someone who's psychopathic, if that's the case, they can do anything they want to their victims, and they feel themselves absolutely no remorse or guilt for what they do. When you have a case like this, or a case that despite the tremendous effort on the part of the detectives and the law enforcement folks that have been working this, when someone is able to fly under the radar screen for an extended period of time, it's generally because they appear to be so normal and non-threatening. The person just doesn't stand out as somebody that is threatening, that stands out as someone that's scary or creepy. They're very normal in two ways. They're normal in their behavior and they're normal in their lifestyle, meaning that they could have a good job, they could be married, they could have children, and in their everyday life, they appear as normal as you and me. They don't go home or back to work and behave in a real nervous way, in an anxious way. They'll go home and have a hamburger and french fries with their family, for example.
When an offender commits a crime outdoors, they can't control everything. They can't control who might have seen them, who ran back into the woods. They can't control who saw their car. So it's very high risk for the offender to kill someone outside. So that tells me this is an offender who's very tolerant of high risk. And when you look at a crime like this, where there's predatory behavior involved, and predatory behavior means hunting behavior, hunting for victims, that suggests to me that one of the motives, and maybe the primary motive, was sexual in nature. But of course, we have to keep in mind always that crimes have multiple motivations for them. Thrill and excitement could have been another one. The power and control over two human beings, yet again another one.
What's interesting as well is that motivations can change actually during the scene itself. So if victims react to the offender in a way that he did not anticipate, then his motivation may be different to, okay, now I have to overcome this victim. I have to take back control from this victim.
But I would say right now, based on what I know about this crime, that sex would be a motivation.
A narcissist is somebody who lacks empathy, is grandiose, is entitled, is constantly seeking validation, is arrogant. It's a disorder of self-esteem, and they have trouble regulating their self-esteem. But when a narcissist does a bad thing, they feel a fair amount of guilt and shame. More shame than guilt, frankly, because they're concerned about how other people view them. Shame is a public emotion. So they don't like being viewed negatively in the public eye or by other people. That's where the shame comes from. But they'll feel a little bad. Like if they cheat on their wife, I probably shouldn't have done that.
Just a little bit of a conscience left.
Psychopath's a different animal. They're all of those things except no guilt, no shame. They don't feel remorse when they do something bad. Wow. So they're great serial killers, hired assassins, people who are going to go in and literally sort of gut a business. These are your guys. They're like, I don't care who gets hurt. They'd say that and they'd mean it. Okay, where a narcissist is like, I hope no one gets hurt. One rule of thumb to remember right off the bat: every psychopath is narcissistic, but not every narcissist is psychopathic. Make sense? There's your key difference. Every psychopath is narcissistic, but not every narcissist is psychopathic.
Well, we believe that a person that would commit a crime like this with such incredibly evil intent likely has committed that crime before. And with that known, he likely will commit it again.
Psychopathy is a personality disorder manifested in people who use a mixture of charm, manipulation, intimidation, and occasionally violence to control others in order to satisfy their own selfish needs. Not all violent offenders are psychopaths, and not all psychopaths are violent offenders. If violent offenders are psychopathic, they are able to assault, rape, and murder without concern for legal, moral, or social consequences. The relationship between psychopathy and serial killers is particularly interesting. All psychopaths do not become serial murderers. Rather, serial murderers may possess some or many of the traits consistent with psychopathy. Psychopaths who commit serial murder do not value human life and are extremely callous in their interactions with their victims.
Brutally murdered 2 little girls.
This is particularly evident in sexually motivated serial killers who repeatedly target, stalk, assault, and kill without a sense of remorse. Psychopathy alone does not explain the motivations of a serial killer. The crime scene behavior of psychopaths is likely to be distinct from other offenders. This distinct behavior can assist law enforcement in linking serial cases.
I also wanted to see if the sheriff would agree that he felt there were so-called signatures left by the perpetrator at the crime scene. But before we go there, let's become familiar with what a signature is. Jeff Reinick is an expert.
When they talk about signatures as it relates to a crime, they're talking about behavior or actions on the part of the offender that might be unique to that offender. I think signatures are very important. The FBI has a database called the Violent Crime Apprehension Program, and it invites local law enforcement to enter their violent cases in there with the intent that local law enforcement would have the opportunity to recognize similar behavior from an offender, let's say across state lines or even across the country. And so when you talk about signatures, that tells me that this offender engaged in behavior that was noteworthy by the investigators or by the crime scene investigators.
The former prosecutor of the case, Robert Ives, told us they existed.
He told us that, in his opinion, there are 2 or 3 signatures left by the killer at the crime scene. And you said you agree in part with that?
A crime scene will tell you a story. Just stand back and observe, watch, see what it's going to tell you. That's why evidence is important. Once you put all those pieces of evidence together like a huge puzzle, it can tell you that story. And so, yes, I agree with what Prosecutor Ives said, that there's things that existed there at that crime scene that when the day comes, put them all back together and here's the story it's going to tell.
Why on earth would you have hurt those people? Why did you kill those people?
No comments. No comments. I cannot answer that at this time.
Jason Bourne, you want to go first?
You bet. I think people tend to assume that psychopaths are highly intelligent. There was some research in 1976 that suggested this, but there's been brand new stuff in 2003 and 2005 from Margaret Kerr and Peter Johansson, who proved that actually the opposite is more likely than not to be true. So they will have a lower level of intelligence. And we see that it's very apparent here with this low level ability in language and general social relatable skills, which an intelligent psychopath can get very good at those things. We call that mask painting or mask creation, whatever you want to call that.
And you took him where?
Out on the I-55 bridge.
And that's where, how was he then taken from the car and placed into the river?
Just opened up the trunk and dumped him in.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
There was no big special deal on it. I couldn't get down in the crawl space that easy, and then I had to bum back to begin with. You got to crawl on your belly to move around in the crawl space. There is no way that I could have done any of the digging down there. I had enough trouble just getting down there.
Greg, what do you got?
I'm going to be real short on this one. This is a normal guy talking, if you're not paying attention. You just think, okay, this is a normal guy talking, except for what he's talking about. Again, this has become so normal to him. I had a quart of cooking oil this morning with my cereal. That's what's going on. This guy's gotten so freaking weird and so criminal that it's just normal for him to talk about this stuff. Look at his dominant eye. We always say your dominant eye is what you shoot with, and it's where you do most of your data intake. Look at that dominant eye shrinking. He's pissed at this guy. And if you can see, you can't see it in his face. You can see he's starting to get a little hostile. You see his face starting to wrench around a little. And then the thing that you're going to pay attention to from here on out is when he's feeling that kind of anger or hostility, his eyes dart down and to his right. Boom, 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 boom. And I think what you're doing is you're tapping into the anger, some emotion you're tapping into, but we're seeing that reflection.
That's the only knowledge that I have of it.
What was the circumstances of that?
He was killed in the house in self-defense.
And who killed him then?
I stabbed him.
Yeah, and it was an issue of self-defense. Why was he in the process of assaulting you, or what?
He was coming at me with a knife. I just took the knife away and twisted it in his hand, and that's what killed him.
So at that point, you yourself did bury him then in the crawl space.
Right, and if you notice, he's under concrete.
Did you bury any of the others in the crawl space?
No, I had nothing. I had no knowledge of them.
Yeah. Well, why is it that your first one is there, and then 20 some others are buried down there as well? Did somebody know that you had done this with the first one, that giving them an idea?
More than likely, when drinking and getting high with the others, yeah.
Admitting it to them. So you feel others then followed your suit in using this as a burial ground?
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
That night, how does this go down on the night that it happened?
We had talked at school that morning, and she said, just let's kill your parents. We'll, run away to Maine together, and everything will be okay. I'll call my friend, and I'll come pick you up at 12. And that night around 11:45, I knew he was out there, so I made a phone call. I said, where are you at? And he said, well, hurry up and get out here, and hung up. So I walked out the house and picked up my little dog Buddy and was petting him all the way to the end of the driveway. Before I knew it, there was a car that came, and it was Bobby and Charles.
So you're outside, and he says, I'm here to kill your parents, so what happened?
I go to get in the car, have no shoes on, no nothing, and he's griping at me for not having, being ready, and not having my bags or anything. Then we drive down to this rundown church. We were trying to get out of it. Oh, we'll just run away. But, they kept egging me on about, and I just guess it was feeding into it.
So did you finally say okay?
Yes, sir.
You finally said, okay, go kill my parents, my mother and my father. The woman that brought me into the world, people that have fed me and clothed me and housed me and loved me every day of my life, sure, go kill them.
Yes, sir.
All right, Greg, what do you got?
So my notes right here say, with all the emotion of a snake, you're talking about this whole thing that it's getting your parents killed. Typically, we associate what's going to happen when you're talking about the act of having your parents killed with shame. And if you go look today and you try to study shame, there's no universal single set of things that people will agree are indicators of shame. But one of the things that we do know is typically people break eye contact. They will try to hide something. They may show embarrassment or sadness or a combination of other emotions. Usually one of my great indicators in pre-confession is chin protecting the throat, because that is when people start to show shame. We don't see any of that. Her chin is up. The only shame I see in her is disappointing Dr. Phil at one point here. That's a really creepy place for that disappointment to be. But you can see it, kind of that drop to the sides of her mouth, and that when she realizes that he's judging her because. Walk through, she's doing that romance, her eyes are riveted. She doesn't break eye contact. There's a lot of her talking with her chin up and her eyes locked, pulled down corners of her mouth. But when she starts to tell the story, interestingly, she's storytelling about being griped at and those pieces. But when it comes to the pertinent stuff about deciding whether somebody got killed or not, the narration kind of turns to just a bunch of stuff. Mark, you'll call it probably word salad, but it's stammering and stattering. There's not a subject or an object. There's just stuff. Or if you don't know what subject and object mean, there's not a doer or a done to. There's just a lot of talking, and we can't really tell exactly what's going on. Then she starts the blame sharing of using the pronoun they instead of I, and she starts to try to answer one of his questions, but when he starts stepping on her about her mother and killing her family, she defers and backs up. I wonder what she was going to say. It wouldn't have been brilliant, guarantee you. But there's no remorse whatsoever here, regardless of whether she has emotion or not. And she does show an indicator that she doesn't like disappointing him, but she certainly shows no emotion about this whole getting her there piece.
either one of these individuals or a group, whatever that might be, that were involved in this. There's multiple ways to resolve this in your mind and in your heart and in your soul. And I hope you'll do the right thing one day.
Yeah, absolutely. Because of how different you are since the murders, I believe you have just a little bit of a conscience left.
And she's just like, it's okay. Like, no matter what happens, I have a situation where I'm either going to be really happy here with you guys and we're going to solve this case together, or I die and I go be with Libby and I get to know everything. Yeah. Like, Libby will tell me and I'll be like, everything will be here now. I'm like, yeah, but then you get to know everything and I get to be down here and just...
We're sad for those that remain, right? But we're all headed that way, and
yeah.
we're all, if we believe, we'll experience His promise.
Exactly.
That eternal life, and that's so important.
Yeah, and I think, like, we don't go to church regularly, but like I feel like we believe strong enough that it's where we're going.
I think you do. I think you do, yeah.
And my grandma, she has, like, such an amazing faith. I love her. All right, last question. If the person that murdered Libby and Abby can hear your voice, what would you want to say to him?
Call him. Call him. I think the person has a bit of a conscience left. You meet him anywhere. And I would be very respectful. That's what I'd say.
Okay.
But when a narcissist does a bad thing, they feel a fair amount of guilt and shame.
To the killer, who may be in this room, we believe you are hiding in plain sight. For more than 2 years, you never thought we would shift gears to a different investigative strategy, but we have. We likely have interviewed you, or someone close to you. We know that this is about power to you, and you want to know what we know. And one day, you will. A question to you. What will those closest to you think of when they find out that you brutally murdered 2 little girls? 2 children. Only a coward would do such a thing. We are confident that you have told someone what you have done. Or at the very least, they know, because of how different you are since the murders. We try so hard to understand how a person could do something like this to two children. I recently watched a movie called The Shack. And there's also a book that talks so well about evil, about death, and about eternity. To the murderer, I believe you have just a little bit of a conscience left. And I can assure you that how you left them in that woods is not what they're experiencing today.